Hey everybody, this is Sean. Hey, I wanted to just briefly broadcast something about this trend that I see lately, and I'm not sure how it got started, and I'm sure it's well intentioned, and so this is not a criticism; it's more of a critique. So, in the coaching and leadership circles, I'm seeing this theme where coaches are saying, did you have to show up powerfully, and in order to show up powerfully, you should empty yourself completely so that whatever's there with the other person can show up. And some people have taken to calling this the zero effect or zero sum effect or some variation of that. And so the message goes something like this: that as a coach or as a leader, you should show up as a zero, because what times zero is a zero. Like, you should not show up with any preconceived notions or any ideas or fears. And the idea, of course, I think it's well intentioned. The idea, of course, is that you're not bringing your own baggage into sessions or coaching sessions, and you're not bringing your own fears. And as a result of not bringing your own fears into sessions, you're helping other people step away from their own fears. I have a problem a little bit though with the conceptualization of it, because zero times anything is zero. And as a coach and as a leader, I don't want to bring zero into the world, right? And so I want to bring a sum into the world. I want something to come into the world. So when I show up as not as a zero, I show up as a one thing, me. I show up as me. And if the other person shows up whatever they show up, then when we connect, that is a true multiplicative effect. So let's say arbitrarily someone shows up as a 2. They've got 2 really big ideas and really big visions. Now, my job as a coach is to hold those visions and to singularly attack each of those things so we don't get too much noise in the system, right? So that they can accomplish what they say they want to accomplish, right? So my job as showing up as a 1 is to say, hey, I get that this is very valuable for you. Now, what's the next step that we're going to take, and which project are we going to work on until completion, and then we'll pick up some other projects. Like, that's my job as a coach, is to show up that powerfully so we focus on one thing. But I'm not going to reduce anything to a 0, and I wouldn't want to. If they have 3 big visions and I show up as a 1 powerfully, then 3 times 1 is 3. Now, if I show up powerfully and teach them to show up powerfully, so now we've got 3 visions, and they go and connect with 6 different people, but they're able to show up as a 3, then 3 times 6 is 18, right? So the multiplicative effect is actually extended when I show up as a 1, not when I show up as a 0. I'm going to bring me into the session. Now, my job as a coach is to be disciplined enough and to know my mind well enough that I'm not going to get distracted by my own thoughts, emotions, or fears. I'm going to show up as a 1 so that I could see clearly what's in front of me. I'm going to show up handled, in other words. Everything is reduced to one thing, me and the person in front of me. Just that one interaction. That's the one. That's the single thing. I don't want to show up as a 0. I don't want to show up as an empty space. Listen, people have plenty of empty spaces that they can talk into, all right? There's lots of people out there that aren't listening. The idea of being present is you show up as the 1. You show up powerful, but you show up. You're not that you're absent. You are in the room with your client, 1 and 1. And that relationship is powerful. That is the space we hold. We don't hold this very Zen, and I'm a huge fan of Zen, by the way, but we don't hold this very Zen talking into an empty space, talking in an empty field. In my training, that's what old psychoanalysis used to do, is just show up, you lie on the couch, and they wouldn't give you any sort of feedback. That shows up as a 0. But you know how many people's lives were transformed by that? Not very many. So I want to show up more powerfully than that. So my message to leaders is, if you start running into this trend and you're like, oh yes, I want to show up as a 0, don't show up as 1. Show up as yourself. And if you can't show up as 1, if you're getting pulled away by your own thoughts and you're pulled away by your own fears or whatever else that is, then you, my friend, need to get yourself handled, because you can't coach anybody until you're handled, so that you can show up and be present powerfly in a conversation 1-to-1. That's my piece on this 0 phenomenon. I hope that's valuable to all of you. Namaste.